This is just a quick note before the show. Alice did a beautiful job editing this episode, and here I am fucking it up by plugging in a little note at the beginning. I am going to be speaking with Jimmy Pappas this Monday, June 8th at 7 p.m. for his weekly meeting. This is much more of a conversation than a reading series. I'm going to be reading some poems by other poets and a couple of my own, and talking about the designated topic is poems against hope. So that's about what it sounds like, but I think it should be fun. And having done one of these before, it's a good crowd, and anybody is welcome to join in. It's a Zoom meeting and take part. It really is a conversation. It's not just, I think Jimmy's very much against straight ahead readings and wants people to talk and dig into these problems together. So I do hope you will check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's just a Zoom link directly into this meeting. It's June 8th at 7 p.m. this Monday. Poems Against Hope. That's 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern time. I think it should be fun. And apologies to Alice for fucking up her editing job. Now here is the show. I was just imagining a pulse-pounding HBO procedural written by Brian Platzer, in which a world-weary Brooklyn podcaster deals with a discombobulated colleague, and you learn a valuable lesson about promptness because the discombobulated colleague signs on to the Zoom several minutes late, and the patient has died as a result. And I was just thinking how watching that I would be really impressed and moved, and how it would in no way make me less likely to be late to every appointment in my life.
No, you'd be instructed. You'd be informed. You'd be instructed. It'd be just another success of didactic art.
I was going to say liberal didacticism, really putting up numbers since 2016.
This is SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. My name is Alice. I am in the editor's chair this week. Brian is back. We have missed him. I can only assume he has been hanging out with Sarah Jessica Parker, as you would. We can't blame him. He is back this week, and I am so happy I got to edit this episode. I have been having a ball today getting this one ready for you. This is an episode about two separate but related things. A couple of weeks ago, Matthew had a conversation with a poet and a colleague of mine at New Verse Review, Daniel Cowper. It was a conversation about his article, Why Don't People Like Poetry? What Poetry Do They Like? Which got at the question of didacticism in art. And Matthew and Daniel's conversation about that question elicited a number of responses from our audience and also from myself, which I will get to in the secret show. So Brian is here to talk about that conversation with Daniel. But before Brian and Matthew get to that, they discuss another article sent to us by Zena Gomez-Liss, the weekend essay published in the New Yorker titled Can Art Teach by David S. Wallace. The description reads, calling something didactic has become grounds for immediate dismissal, but do the merits of works with an educational bent, from The Pit to Elizabeth Costello, suggest we should think again? So, look, I am not going to read this essay because it's way more fun to listen to Matthew and Brian take it apart. And that's what happens in the first half of this episode. I don't usually laugh that much while I'm editing because I'm very focused on what I'm doing, but I couldn't help it. I lost it quite a few times listening to this conversation. Let's get straight into it.
Teaching another little fiction class because the God bless him, the little place I work for neglected to set up a venue for the class. I hosted it at my house last night, but they also neglected to get
How
the
many
schedule straight.
people?
5 people, but then they came a full hour early.
All of them?
Well, because they had been having the class at the
Oh,
same, and it was just a different time that I
yeah,
had her that was listed.
yeah.
So yeah,
That's
it
easy.
was an exhausting day, but
And are you solo with the girls?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I was a week
Yeah,
solo, and then Joanna got
yeah,
back, and I'm a week
yeah.
again.
That's a lot.
Yeah, my sister-in-law helped a little last night, which was
How do you pronounce the didactic guest's name whom you had on a couple weeks ago?
I don't know. There's a poet whose name is William, and I think it's pronounced William Cooper. That's spelled the same way, but I just have pronounced it phonetically as Daniel Cowper.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. And you don't
Um,
mind if I say mean stuff about him?
no, no, I got a whole lot of correspondence about that episode, and yeah, it was yeah, interesting mix. But there
But
was
what's
one.
your connection to this guy?
I have no connection.
Okay.
I had seen, I mean, I'd seen his name bubbling up in a lot of the circles that I'm familiar with, and I read the essay of his on that is not, it did not set out to be, or it did not purport initially to be an essay on didactic art. It purported to be an essay saying, okay, if poetry, if a lot of the poetry I like is unpopular, what poetry is popular? Turns out a lot of this it's didactic, and so from that angle, I thought it was a pretty worthwhile
Yep.
like investigation of the topic. Then, unsurprisingly, mostly we talked about didactic poetry,
Right.
and then in the very last 10 minutes of the secret show, he had one little argument that then totally derailed all of the responses of everybody I heard from who listened to
But
it,
what do you
basically.
see that argument as having been?
The argument for didacticism.
Because it seemed to me that mostly he was saying like socializing is easy in like the last
Oh, yeah.
15 minutes.
Yeah, no, no. So I don't think he derailed his own argument. I'm just saying that, like, it was so salient in contrast to everything else he said that, like, it was sort of like the one thing anybody knew. It was like when Obama spoke to Mark Maron for 2 hours, and then he
Yeah.
used the N word once, and then that was
Yeah.
the only thing anybody had to say
Yeah.
about it. And
Um,
similarly, like I disagreed with so much of what he said that when he also said another thing I disagreed with at the end, I still disagreed with it, but like it didn't leap out at me in the same way that I think it leapt out at a lot of listeners.
well, we should save this for the show,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
or are
yeah.
we recording now? Because I think that there was
Yes.
something instructive about the way that you handled him at the end, which
Okay.
I think we can discuss.
Sure. Yeah. Should we do my impulse is usually to we can do it in whatever order. My impulse is usually like to save things that require you to be familiar with another episode already for the secret show,
Yeah, that
if that
makes
makes sense.
sense.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
makes sense.
But I got a note from Zena Gomez-Liss, who is also working on an essay about didacticism that I'm eager to read when she's finished with it. But she forwarded me this article from the New Yorker called "Can Art Teach" by David S. Wallace that I then forwarded to you, and then read after sending it to you, and had various thoughts and feelings. And I meant to look up the question that in my own mind was framed as who the fuck is David Wallace David S. Wells. There's David Wallace Wells,
Right, not David
yeah,
Wallace
yeah,
Wells,
and not David Foster Wallace,
not
but
David Foster
David S.
Wallace.
Wallace, and not David S. Pumpkins. But all right, yeah, who seems like a 16-year-old boy with gray hair based on his photo.
I mean, this essay, and we can get into it more, but I've got a friend who enjoys forwarding me essays in the Atlantic with like hyperbolic headlines, clickbait
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
headlines
yeah.
from the Atlantic. And I have a different friend who likes to take seriously essays in the New Yorker to discuss. And then sort of I've always been amused by Slate
Yeah,
dot
yeah.
com, and I'm coming off this publicity tour where I was asked to write a bunch of essays along the lines of these. And I just don't think the instructive opinion-based short form essay with a catchy headline is a valuable product. I just I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know. I
yeah.
mean, I read so many of them,
Yeah.
in the New York Times primarily, but also in the New Yorker and in the Atlantic and Slate and
Yeah,
the other places where these things are published. And I just think they're dumb. The ability to have a strong opinion about something based in pseudo facts and examples
right.
that is both true and not obvious. I just don't know if that's a plausible way to engage intellectually. I confronted
Well, it's
this.
plausible, but yeah, is it credible? Is it,
Acceptable
yeah,
maybe,
right,
or
yeah,
credible is maybe a better way to
yeah,
say it.
yeah,
But I mean, I'm a little bit like excusing myself for my inability to write them. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
is
yeah.
part of this conversation.
Even with ChatGPT, we're unable to write to write
Even
think pieces.
somehow,
You know.
even with hundreds of hours spent with ChatGPT,
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. And I think this essay by David S. Wallace is a pretty decent example why the form is terrible. Like
Yeah.
it, because there's no real argument in this essay, but it seems like it has a million arguments. He
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
references a bunch of cultural artifacts and never really defines his terms, never really discusses how these cultural artifacts fit within the undefined terms, and then ends with a false conclusion, with like a conclusion-y feel, but without a real conclusion. And I think
Yeah. Yeah.
so many of these essays that you and I have discussed on this show and that just I take in as my daily, dose of cultural medicine, like I just don't think 1,500 words on why something is or is not good is like an acceptable intellectual form. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So just last night I read a little essay by Ethan McGuire, which is sort of touches on some of the stuff, but what it reminded me of, because it basically it was like a Montaigne essay where he started by saying like, "Hey, isn't this a great quote? It really
Right.
reminds me of this other really great quote." And yeah, I kind of agree with this, but there's also this other really great quote, and it's like a bunch of
Yeah.
amazing quotes from different sources and some meditations in between, but mostly it's a sort of like it's enjoyable to read. It reminds you of a bunch of great stuff. It's filled with beautiful language, and like it has some ideas in it, but it doesn't feel tendentious. It doesn't feel like he's sort of guarding his ass, like covering his ass, or like trying to kind of force an argument down. He just seems
Yeah.
like he's being reminded of what stuff that's wonderful to think about.
Yeah. Montaigne is a wonderful counterpoint. I read a shitload of him because I studied, English and
French
French
stuff, yeah, yeah.
literature in college and then beyond. And I
I'm watching you get attention headache by thinking about Montaigne again.
Yeah, no, but that's sort of part of the my issue with Montaigne, whom I return to
Yeah, yeah,
in trying to figure out if I could write essays to try to publicize my novel.
right,
And I think maybe I'm just older, but also I've been conditioned by having read, my 10,000 hours of
right.
this kind of like thesis based slop where
Yeah.
Montaigne
He
just
couldn't get published in the Atlantic.
it's boring is the problem. It's so hard to get through. It's like you have to claw your way through all these quotations to get to his I think like
I think if you
really
go to them
lovely,
looking for the
brilliant
kernel, it's
ideas.
terrible.
Like
Yeah,
he's like I he's a what's so delightful about Montaigne is there new ideas exist in what he's writing,
right.
but they're not highlighted or emphasized or underlined or
Yeah,
forefronted
yeah, yeah.
or something. They just sort of roll with the contour or within the contours of his essays, which makes it's sort of a frustrating exercise to get, you read on friendship and
Mhm.
there are like three or four just like beautiful, brilliant reimaginations of definitions of friendship, but you sort of have to like claw your way through anecdote and other discussions to get
Yeah.
there in a way
Yeah, I
that
think if that's what you like, if you go to them looking to get that morsel, then it's a miserable experience.
but I guess what I'm saying is when I was a intellectual and physical virgin reading all of this for the first time, I hadn't been conditioned by these other essays to like I didn't really know how to read anything. So there was something about Montaigne which was a delight,
Yeah.
and I return to him now, and I'm it takes this sort of muscle that has atrophied in me to
Yeah.
seek out and enjoy the observations, whereas an essay such as this one, Can Art Teach, is so eager to announce its observations from the start that it fails in such obvious ways that I think Montaigne for the most part succeeds. We can talk about Montaigne another time. I'm not prepared. I'm not prepared
I was
to
gonna say I would love
go
to
deep in that,
I
but
don't want to subject you to torture, but like I would actually love to read an essay or two.
No, as would I. As would I. That would probably be healthy for us and for our listeners. The basic point of this essay in the New Yorker is that the Pit, the television show, is good. Do you disagree with me that that's the basic point?
No, it reminded me of like certain writing by like mid-century continental philosophers or like speeches by like 21st century right-wing podcasters where it's like there's sort of a political or moral argument, but then every example has to do with why the age of consent law should be low. Like,
right.
And you feel like, wait a minute, it seems like what you really want to talk about is this other thing.
Like, it seems like David S. Wallace wanted to write a positive review of the television show The Pit, right? But instead, has been commissioned.
The New Yorker was like, no, we already have a lady who does that.
Yeah. So, all of a sudden we're in the subhead, but to the merits of works with an educational bent from The Pit to Elizabeth Costello suggests we should think
but mostly
again.
The Pit.
I happen to have read Elizabeth Costello. Have you read the book?
No. I mean, yeah. I like J.M. Coetzee, but
it's this hysterical Coetzee novel where basically there's this like old lady who believes in animal rights who delivers multiple full speeches about primarily animal rights, but also other moral issues. And the book consists of her speeches with like little bits in between her speeches where people question whether her speeches are like valid or not. And like she gets hungry or tired and needs to go to the bathroom. But Elizabeth Costello, which is mentioned in the subhead along with The Pit of this essay, is in like a sentence and a half of this essay, right? So he wants to write about how The Pit's good, but he talks about Elizabeth Costello for a bit. Hesiod. He gets to Ovid.
He quotes a very unconvincing account of entertainment by Bertolt Brecht.
Exactly, Brecht at the end, Immanuel Kant, but none of these things are really relevant to one another or
the real
to
subject
The Pit.
of this essay is, and another thing about The Pit.
Right. Have you watched The Pit?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, both seasons?
Yes.
Yeah. I think The Pit is pretty good. Do you have opinions about The Pit?
I do. And my experience of watching it is so specific because I watch it with my wife.
Well, right, and she's a doctor.
Who is a doctor, and so like so much, but like no, so much of the pleasure of it, because I think it's a very well done show, but so much of the pleasure of it is the pleasure of like sharing, like the way Joanna watches it is like it's an Encyclopedia Brown story where she tries to guess what everybody has, and she's pretty good at it because she's a pretty good doctor. But like she's not an emergency room doctor, but she did work in the Baltimore emergency room for a while, which is a rough place, and comparable in some ways to the Pittsburgh one. And like watching with her is basically an act of like marital bonding over like her sense of how like poorly understood the medical profession is and how like bad Republican policies are bad for the medical field and like sharing a lot of basically preachy obvious liberal talking points that like she and I agree on and
The Pit agrees with,
and
right?
So we
Pit,
feel
you
like
and she
it's basically like an experience of like being affirmed in like agreeing with my wife, and like that's a perfectly lovely marital experience. I don't think that is actually the best. Like, I don't think that's the heights of art as we experience it, or as The Pit. I don't think that's even the best part of The Pit.
Right.
But it's like an easy pleasure that is sort of soothing to take in. Because like, we're smug liberals, so we enjoy smug liberal shows. Like,
it's a great show. It's a great television program. Like there are
very entertaining.
There are physically attractive, earnest people trying to do their best,
Yeah.
and then there are conflicts, and they might not be able to achieve their best in spite of how they're trying because of their own personal flaws and because of externalities. And sometimes they achieve their goals, and sometimes they don't. And because human beings are interested in whether other human beings are able to achieve the goals they set out for themselves, it's like a compelling watch.
Can I give you my Freudian wish fulfillment interpretation of the pit?
Yeah, please.
Which is that we are, as he points out, like we are, what we really want is just to be intravenously hooked up to AI slop on TikTok that changes channels every 1 second. But the pit tells us that we have to change subjects every 1 second because medicine is hard. And so we enjoy like the insane pace of the show is responsible and smart instead of being just us flicking through a feed.
So the article mentions that because the article mentions everything. The paragraph is, in the age of social media, a new variety of instruction has arisen, rooted in passive exposure to facts and embodied by YouTube explainer videos and short form how-tos on TikTok, a kind of simulated enrichment that never really sates us. That's more or less what you're saying, that they're taking that hyper-stimulation and applying it to a long-form television show.
Well, he would say the pit is the antidote to that. And I'm saying, no, the pit is another version of that.
Right. And later on in that paragraph, one day you emerge from a daze and find that you've been watching isolated YouTube shorts from the show Suits instead of whole episodes of the real show.
I think he should copy paste that and replace his about section on his personal website with that sentence. So that was like the best portrait of David S. Wells that I got in this episode.
So his argument here is that what's bad is watching heightened scenes from the show Suits.
We really want to get the vegetables of Suits. We want to get like the real fiber that the show has.
Watching episodes of Suits.
That's like because we have to, it builds character to watch a full episode of Suits from start to finish. It really,
Kids today, they're not watching full episodes.
We had to watch full episodes both ways to school.
They're watching shorter clips of
just the fun, stupid parts of Suits, not the instructive parts.
Suits is a show where a guy is so smart he doesn't need to go to law school, but in every scene he uses his intelligence to outwit people who have gone to law school. So instead of watching like 10 of those scenes in a row as the showrunners meant it to be, these sons of bitches, these kids today are watching 10 of those in a row in a different order.
They never learn the important lesson that you don't have to go to Harvard to sleep with Meghan Markle.
It's a confusing moral of the story. I don't know what I think his basic point, to be as generous as we can, is a show like The Pit, book like Elizabeth Costello, and Bertolt Brecht are all good because they aren't just pure entertainment, but they also teach something. I think that's what he would argue.
Yeah.
To my mind, obvious flaw in his delivery of the argument is that his definition of teach changes so many times that it has lost all denotation. Do you agree with that?
On the back of my copy, I wrote a list of things David S. Wells calls didacticism.
Great, right? I've done something comparable, so you can go first.
Includes like moral instruction.
Yes, I have morals as one.
Yeah, PSAs, verisimilitude.
Yep, facts. I have another. Right.
Virtue signaling / preaching to the choir /
right. General lessons. I have that.
And then the category I would set apart from PSAs and verisimilitude is what I would call fact porn.
Yes,
right? Which is like, ooh, ooh, that's a neat fact. Like, oh,
Right.
wow, like the fun of learning a new fact.
And that's his
Is the
list.
pleasure, yeah.
That's his list on page 1. We learn about how the shortage of nurses limits hospital bed space, the rate of which patients assault nurses, the fact that the space of the retzius, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's a part of the pelvis, is named after a professor. That's sort of fact porn, what you're saying. Yeah. So I don't think it's worth our spending much more time criticizing him for glopping in together all of these things that generally fit under the category of like learning, which seems to be synonymous with didacticism in this essay.
What about his staggering contempt for the reader? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. We can do that first. But what I want to return to is, what of these things does have value? Like,
yes, yeah.
Because I don't know my own opinion about that as much as I know my frustration with his sloppiness. So you can discuss his contempt for the reader, and then I think you and I should try to earnestly tease out what types of teaching should or can exist in good art.
Yeah, no, I mean, the contempt for the audience thing is sort of, it's twofold. It's like both like bizarre moments, like when he says, the pit is filled with moments like this, pinpricks of education in which the natural speech of a character warps as the script bends to convey a message. And to be clear, he's saying those moments are the good parts.
Yeah.
And then he says at the end, I think it's the last paragraph. Yeah, it's like the antepenultimate sentence. He says, although I occasionally roll my eyes at a preachy moment, these don't really detract from my enjoyment. He's talking about the pit when he says this, but he's saying, when I occasionally roll my eyes at a preachy moment, these don't really detract from my enjoyment. Like, first of all, yes, like that is the definition of detracting from your enjoyment. But also, like, it seems like it feels like he thinks we hogs need this.
Right. I mean, he uses the word warped non-negatively, which I don't think I've ever seen before.
No, it's crazy. Like it feels like it really does seem like he just, like, he can't. He says at one point, like, I count, lovers of the highbrow, I count myself among them, have long defended the value of so-called difficult art. And he defends highbrow art, but he defends it basically as being difficult didactic art. Like, it teaches its lessons, but in a way that you have to be really smart to take in.
Harder to get to the lessons.
Isn't it better for us to open the channel of the didactic is in part to expect more of ourselves and of others, to hope we might grow together. Like, but we should really descend to the level where the ordinary, the hoi polloi can take in these important messages, which again, like, I think his model at least doesn't deny what I did get sometimes a little bit frustrated with Cowper and certain other defenders of didacticism. He seems like Elijah to embrace that, like, yes, the artist does need to know better than the audience. Like,
so are we gonna save how terrible that Cowper man is for the secret show? Or are we gonna do that now?
We can save your thoughts on him for,
because I hold that fellow in contempt. I hold him in contempt.
Spoiler.
I think that man is a bad man.
Yeah. But then the other part of
essay.
The other part of the contempt, it was, I thought, like, just the bizarre out of touchness, or like, I don't know what to call it. He says, like, the opening, the deck of the piece, the subhead is, calling something didactic has become grounds for immediate dismissal. He says, like, he points out how the word of the day and Manola Dargis used didactic as a negative word. He quotes her as saying that Marty Supreme doesn't serve up any life lessons in the pious finger-wagging manner of many American independent movies. He doesn't seem to understand that many American independent movies do this. He has this, like, brief to be sure paragraph where he says, like, some might say that, the frequent appearance of works that consistently foreground or endorse liberal concerns and arguments has inspired no shortage of bad feelings. Like, it, some people might even say that, like, there's a lot of didactic art, and to me, it feels like if in the new Castilian, you had a think piece that was published 1 year after the end of the Spanish Inquisition that was like, have you noticed how calling something inquisitive And asking something, what's wrong with inquiring into the faith? It feels like it's, isn't how did this become a bad word? You just feel like how do you not know what culture you're writing in? It just feels like it's I don't know, like it's so high-handed. It's so sorry, I used that word incorrectly, that term incorrectly. It's not high-handed. It sits on a high horse and just gazes down at the reader of the New Yorker even with contempt. I just thought like I like the New Yorker, and I thought like this is way too dumb an article and too contemptuous an article to appear in its page. It's not even contemptuous. Like at least be like gleefully contemptuous. Like who's that guy? Anthony, what's his name? Who's like smart and knows a lot.
Anthony Lane, the film.
Yeah. He can look down his nose with like, and it's like it's a great pleasure. He also has a subject verb agreement error, which annoyed me. But I think that came out of a fact check.
I mean, I also wonder whether he feels superior just writing a positive review of the Pit, so he needs to fill it with a whole bunch of references that he wants, sort of signals to the reader that he's condescending to celebrating the Pit when he would be more excited to talk about Alain Resnais's Night in Fog, which documented the horrors of the Holocaust. Like he just like makes a list.
So clearly
of,
not the case. Like so clearly all
right.
he wants to talk about is the Pit.
Right.
But
Okay.
do you think he's trying to signal that he's superior to that, or that he's like recruiting readers of the New Yorker into his contempt for people who?
I think that he's saying that his love of the Pit is consistent with his highbrow love of greater works of art, not he's not sort of selling out his own critical vision. He's saying that the Pit fits into a grander literary canon.
All right, I have here's I'm scripting a scene. David S. Wallace walks into a bar in, I'm assuming, Brooklyn.
Yeah, well, really, you think?
And he runs into his ex-girlfriend that he's never gotten over, and her much taller, extremely successful writer new boyfriend. And they have a perfectly friendly conversation because they're not immature kids anymore. They can talk. Well, there's nothing. Why can't exes be friends? And they're having a conversation, and he says offhand something. He conveys he's had a few micro brews, and he conveys with a little too much enthusiasm some of his enjoyment of the Pit. And the new prestigious boyfriend gazes off into the distance and says, "I found it a little middlebrow." And then this is the whole, like, this is the result of that, like,
exactly.
just hours of self-torment.
Yep. This is the middle brow. It fits exactly into the realm. It's right between Elizabeth Costello and Alain Resnais's. Right. Are you not familiar with Godard? Yeah.
Okay, now, see, again, I made a dramatic monologue out of it, and now I like it.
Exactly. Well, that's again. Well, but that's also what Elizabeth Costello is, which is interesting. A series of dramatic, like a series
so it doesn't like
Coetzee's
like so how do you say his name?
Coetzee usually.
Coetzee?
Yeah.
He's so smart and funny and like morally ruthless.
Yeah.
That I like the way he described this novel. I thought like that doesn't sound like the books of his I've read. Like it doesn't sound like
it's an outlier in terms of the books that you've read. What I've again, it's been literally 20 years since I've read it, but my understanding and memory of it was that he liked these speeches. Like these are sort of speeches that Coetzee himself could have delivered.
Okay.
But he realized that putting together a collection of speeches was sort of shameful. So he did what you and I want everybody to do, which is to recontextualize actual opinions into a fiction, and therefore make the speeches have a I don't know, an emotional valence or a character.
Let us give us someone to care about.
And then you can disagreeing or agreeing with them takes on a sort of a literary and not just, political philosophical merit.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
To take a step back.
Yeah.
A couple questions about the Pit and then a couple questions about didactic art in general. Does it bother you when watching the Pit that the Black people are all morally unquestionable? That any time that there is any kind of villain,
Right, right,
whether
right.
a potential shooter, mass shooter, whether a spousal abuser, whether somebody who molests his
Yeah, yeah,
kids,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that person is going to be a straight cis white male.
Yeah. Or like a MAGA white female.
Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Whereas the people who are more sensitive and can sort of diagnose things in a different way are either like, brooding depressive Jews or women of color. Like, does
Yeah,
that get
yeah.
in the way of your enjoyment of the show?
So my experience of the pit as just like a popular entertainment is that tracking like popular high, popular middlebrow, coastal liberal entertainment for the last 10 years, part of what allows this to be enjoyable to me is that it feels like it fits into that mode. It is generally speaking, consistent with like preachy liberal art, but to me it's just toned way down. So it's like it's the same tropes that I see and have seen in annoying,
Yeah.
excessively woke, self-satisfied art for the last 10, 15 years, but it's milder than like it's less didactic than
Right.
most. So yeah, like I noticed like the moments that he rolls his eyes at, I roll my eyes at. I roll my eyes probably at more of them than he
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And I honestly I also roll my eyes at the moments that he seems to really praise, like I mean, I thought like the things that were actually impressive and moving about the scene dealing with the rape kit
Yeah.
were not the scenes where we learn new facts about rape kits or we learn that like rape is bad and is complicated in its consequences, but that where we get to actually watch characters make decisions and have experiences. So
Yeah, I agree
I
with that.
roll my eyes at a lot of those things, but to me, it's like this is a less extreme version of all of those tendencies
That's interesting.
than much other art in this general genre.
Right. So you see all of what I said as minor flaws in the show, but not deal-breaking flaws because they're such major flaws in other works of art.
Yeah, like the same tendency is there in so much other popular, like so many other shows I've watched with my wife have those same tendencies. Like the white straight guy is the villain, and the woman of color is the hero. But it's like that turned up all the way, whereas this is like that turned down to like six. And so it's like it just feels so much milder to me that I'm able to enjoy the showness of the show more.
Does it bother you in the show the ripped from the headlines political statements of every 3 or 4 episodes? Like, you should vaccinate your kids against measles, and ICE shouldn't make appearances around vulnerable people, scattering their attention. And does that is that within the same category of what we were just discussing, or is that a different category?
Same category, basically like yes, but so toned down from the norm of the last 10 years that it feels less jarringly annoying and takes me out of the story less. Also, I have the other like I will say like whereas often watching this kind of show in recent years with my wife, the rip from the headlines insight will be so obnoxiously misandrist or like so
Yeah.
obnoxious that it that like I'm not able to enjoy with my wife that we are both liberals who agree with the show. Whereas with the pit, it just feels like it is at a level that allows me not only to be less jarred, but also to take what I consider to be a very unsavory and unwholesome pleasure in thinking like, yeah, fuck Donald Trump's use of ICE, and
Yeah.
yeah, fuck
Yeah.
people who don't want to get their kids back. Like it, that again, it lets me enjoy some of that, but like that does not seem to me to be like a good thing. That feels
Yeah.
like that's again, that's like oh yeah, we both enjoyed this pornography.
On a commercial level, I think I was most confused by the vaccination and the ICE subplots. Like, why do you think they were in the show? Because this gets to me, this gets me towards the question of didacticism, I think, as a decent transition, which is it's clear that the showrunners in those moments were trying to be didactic
Yeah,
based on some definition of the term didactic. And I don't really understand why. I can't imagine that HBO sold additional subscriptions, or Paramount or Max or whatever owns it now. Like, if the goal is to get people to watch the show and subscribe, to the streaming services, like, it seems like that would be off-putting to more people than it would be deal clinchingly exciting to. Like, is that just that the showrunners believe it's their moral imperative to add these, like, I should stay away from compromised people and you need to vaccinate your kids
I don't
points
know, but
into the
here's
show?
I
Because, like,
haven't.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
I am the show's resident, like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
lefty, and I am bothered by that. I just don't know who that satisfies,
I have a theory actually that I think there is a commercial angle there.
whom that satisfies. Yeah.
So I would say that the commercial angle there is the show is mostly going to be
Let me just say, sorry, Alice, you are the SLEERICKETS' leftiest lefty, probably. I am probably
yeah, yeah,
second leftiest to you, Alice.
yeah. I would say like if anything, like Cameron is
And
probably
Cameron. I am
yeah.
the conservative voice of SLEERICKETS.
Yeah, I was gonna say like Cameron is like either alt right or he would like be throwing the garbage can through the bank window, but like only because they would get him laid. Like it would
Right.
be like,
That's like, I mean, he is like the political horseshoe, right? Where he's like the fascistic
yeah, like
communist
what party has the
sex
most like
fiend.
drugs and
Right.
pussy or dick
Right.
at
Right.
it that I can go take
In
advantage
this
of?
in this city at this
Right
moment
at
in
this
time.
moment, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Love you, Cameron.
yes,
Um,
yeah. So no, so the angle I think is that the pleasure is in a way in like it's a cats rule and dogs drool moment. It's a no boys allowed moment. Like it's the that it might be putting off some right wing viewers or some like whatever wing viewers is the appeal. Like the feeling you have, which is like, ooh, I could imagine somebody who was a little more, down the middle or a little, or maybe had like half-heartedly voted for Trump once might sort of feel alienated by this. I think that person might feel alienated by it in the mind of a liberal is the appeal.
okay. I believe that.
Yeah.
Didacticism. So going through
Yeah,
the
yeah.
list of, you and I have separate lists.
Yeah.
What do you think has the tendency to make art better versus what do you think has the tendency to make art worse? And I guess we should stick to narrative art specifically because
Sure. Yeah.
he has this weird digression where he talks about, is it Kant who wrote Critique of Judgment
Yeah.
and talks about beauty as self-contained. I don't know what narrative beauty means. I don't know how beauty in a novel works in this definition. I mean, Kant is always a little tricky in terms of exactly what he's talking about, but
Yeah. And I have not read that book, so I can't.
yeah. So I just sticking with narrative art then, because you can imagine a painting that is just like
Yeah. Beautiful
aesthetically
piece of music
stunning.
that's beautiful.
That
Yeah.
music that's aesthetically stunning, but
Yeah.
morally hollow. I mean, as I think all music is, but come
Yeah,
at
yeah,
me.
yeah. Yeah, what is the precise aesthetic pleasure of great narrative art? It's a little
Right.
harder
Or
to
what
pin
is the
down,
aesthetic
yeah.
pleasure divorced from other pleasure? I don't understand how that would
Because
work.
it does feel like it's a little bit more of it's a blending of things that is part of the pleasure of it.
Agreed. So forgetting that Kantian,
Yeah.
pure aesthetic.
Which again, he draws a straight line between that and AI slop.
Yes, exactly.
It's like
exactly.
a bizarre argument. Yeah.
But what do you think, which types of didacticism make art better?
Right. Well, of the things that Wallace calls didacticism, I think the one
yeah.
that does have straightforward value in works of art is verisimilitude.
Define verisimilitude. I mean, I know what the word means.
Yeah. Like
things
like,
in the art are the same
right.
as things
Like
in real life. But
there
what
are
do you?
things like when you're including when you look up a bunch of stuff, when you do research and you try to get things right, when you try to do your homework and get make sure that things are accurate. I think the actual value of that in a work of art is not that it provides a public service. It's not that it's fact porn. It's not that it's virtue signaling. It's not that it's teaching an actual moral lesson. It's that it keeps you from having the thought like, nah, that's not quite right when you're reading. So that you can be immersed in the story. I think that has value. I don't think that's didacticism.
But hang on. I think that's a cop out.
Didacticism.
I think that's a cop out. I tend to disagree with that. So let's have that argument just for a quick 2 minutes. I remember in graduate school somebody citing Nabokov, a conversation. Probably this never happened. But so somebody citing a conversation where someone's like, I want to be a writer. And how do I do that, Mr. Nabokov?
Yeah.
And he's like, do you know the name of that tree outside the window? And they're like, no, it's just the tree. And he's like, then you'll never be a writer because like, you don't have the ability to create verisimilitude in that way. And
yeah, I think that's not my definition of verisimilitude.
And yeah. I find that almost any time I need to look up a fact, I shouldn't be writing about that. I should be writing about something else. I just don't like when I'm reading historical fiction, like I am constantly cringing about the facts in the succulent guinea hen prepared over coals for. I'm like, what is that?
The other thing that is, sorry, I didn't include on this list, which is I think the biggest flaw that like the biggest risk that a writer has when writing work that required some research is I looked this up, so I better include it.
Right.
Like wanting credit for the research you did. And that's a terrible, terrible tendency. And I think it's a huge risk. So, I mean, again, I think like Franzen is right where he says the best result that research can yield is permission to make it up.
Yeah, great. Okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You think that's the most useful form of didacticism?
No, I think of the things he calls didacticism, the most aesthetically valid one is making sure that you didn't fuck up the basic facts of the like setting of your story.
All right, then let me do my best to steel man an argument with which I disagree, because I think we're both two on the same side of this.
Okay. Sure.
Is there is value in having somebody watch your television show, read your poem, read your novel, and walk away understanding that poor people, Black people, Jewish people, women are full-fledged human beings too? And that even though you came in thinking of them as lesser or different in some way, in fact, they're not. And the job of my art is to show you that the characters, the human beings whom the characters represent, they are deeper and more real than you before reading my art have ever understood.
Yeah, I have a paradoxical view of this, which is that I think to the extent to which art has real moral function, the best argument for that is the one you're making, which is I read this and it, maybe it put me in the perspective of a Palestinian child being bombed by Israelis, and it made me think about what that day is like and what that experience is like, and came out of that. I came out of that with like my focus on this particular plight and this kind of experience in a way that it wasn't before. More often, it's that it sort of jarred me back into a deeper empathy with my fellow human beings in general, and it made me think about being in the perspective of all of the people around me in a way that makes me then more likely to be patient, less likely to be reflexively cruel, more likely to show compassion. On the other hand, I think that if you as a writer are setting out to do that with your writing, you are almost certainly doomed to failure. And you will almost certainly have a very different effect on your reader and on your work.
Yeah, the problem is I just completely agree with you. I just I I find, the to delight and instruct. I find the instruction part of that so suffocating and so high horsey that anytime I see that leak into a work of art, I'm repulsed.
So this is a question that kept coming to mind when I was thinking about this was to go back to our favorite shared source of wisdom, the New Testament.
Love it. Great
Yeah,
book.
my
Word
name.
made flesh, baby.
Yeah, my namesake. It is other problems. It is a pretty amazing piece of writing, but it's yeah, it's
The
yeah.
whole
It,
thing,
right,
like
the
all
New
the,
Testament as a whole,
the
like oh, no, I
yeah,
mean,
of course.
I don't
Of
think
course the New Testament as a whole is good writing.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
yeah.
No,
But
but
it contains
it
there's a
contains a
lot
lot.
in
Yeah, it
there.
contains a lot.
It's
Right.
not
Yeah,
like that's
exactly.
not
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
Yeah,
French
but
literature is also like good writing.
right,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
The
it's just
Norton
that's a large
anthology contains
subject.
some
Yeah,
pretty good
exactly.
lines in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, the line that kept coming to mind was "No man can serve two masters," and the thought I had was like, all right, like whenever I think about didactic art, that's the line I think of. You're serving two masters. The thought I also had playing the devil's advocate was like, but can a man serve two
Right, exactly.
masters?
So
Right? Yeah.
that's what I was thinking because
Yeah.
I agree with you instinctively, but again, if you I just read your is it called a chapbook? I read your book of
Yes.
poems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, what's the difference between a chapbook and a book?
It's a lot shorter, and it doesn't take the poem's book virginity. So you can still publish
Oh,
those
is that
poems.
true?
You can publish those poems in a full length book, and it's still kosher.
But isn't that true for all collections?
If you
If
were
they
to
were published
publish,
in
like if I
journals
were to publish, if I
beforehand?
were to take poems from my, one of my full length books
Oh,
and
sure.
publish them in another book, I would have to get permission from that press.
Okay. Right.
The
Okay.
chapbook, you don't.
Fine.
Yeah.
I read your chapbook and I think it's really wonderful. And I read it again and I thought it was wonderful again. And if you were to tell me that the only purpose of that book is to delight, to bring you see, this is where actually I don't know. I was going to say if the
Right,
only
right, right.
purpose is to bring pleasure, I would disagree, but I think that probably is the only purpose. It's just then a redefinition of the term pleasure.
Yeah, a dense definition of pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah. B-
Yes,
So
I
what
think
do
so.
you?
I don't. If you were to tell me that you thought you learned some valuable moral lessons from my
Yeah,
chapbook, I would
yeah, you would
make the
think less
face.
of
I would
me.
make
You
the
would think
face
less
you
of
just
me.
made, and
Yeah.
I would say, "Well, thank you so much." But yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, it just like that seems like because I mean the honest question is like, which lessons did you learn that you did not already know? Was there actual new more or less? I mean, again, like I think a great point Ethan made in his. It's not a point he made. It's a point he quoted Aristotle as making in his essay from last night. Is not only does reading great books not make you a better person, reading great philosophical treatises on ethics doesn't make you a better person. So I think like that's part.
Does reading literature though?
No, he says reading. He says reading.
I'm asking you. Does
Oh,
reading
does it make
literature
you a
make you a
better
better
person?
person?
No, I don't think so. I think you can respond to literature by making yourself a better person. You can also respond to baseball by making yourself a better person. You
Yeah.
can respond to any number of things that way.
So I mean, I've had multiple people reach out to me after reading my novel saying they have a new perspective on what the teachers who meant a lot to them might be thinking. And
Oh, interesting. Okay.
that has value for them. Is that within the category of pleasure?
Part of my question would be then like, did they take pleasure in that? Because yeah, I mean,
Yeah. I
I think it's if that is a thing that they recognized about themselves and said to themselves, my guess is that in part that they felt like they were taking pleasure. Like reading it,
Mm-mm.
it did make me focus in a way that it didn't make me think differently about teachers because I guess I've done teaching, so it didn't. But like
Yeah.
it did make me, for example, focus my attention for in a longer and more sustained way on what it would be like to be paralyzed in a way that don't normally do that. And so I
Right.
did have some thoughts I wouldn't have had otherwise. I don't
And are those
know
thoughts
that.
valuable outside our expansive definition of the word pleasure?
I think they could be. The thoughts that one has in response to a novel could be valuable in lots of different ways. But I don't think it's sort of like the thoughts that Descartes had when he watched a fly crawling around at a ceiling
Yeah.
turned out to give us, like, a certain branch of
So now
mathematics.
you are more into you're more interested in the intention of the poet than you are of the reader of poetry.
No. I think that the intention of the
But
poet.
but that's the serving two masters issue that you were speaking about earlier, where you were talking about how if the goal of the poet is to delight and instruct, it's going to be worse than if the intention of the poet is just to delight,
he,
assuming delight has a larger meaning than
yeah, so
it
here's
does
a there's a all
colloquially.
right, so I think maybe so. In addressing the question of didacticism, I am more interested in talking about the author's intention. There is a second, like, I'm imagining like a parallel universe where everybody wrote think pieces about art being didactic, but instead of writing them about popular TV shows where they say, like, well, I see what lesson you're teaching there, and you know what, I think Americans need it. Instead of that, they said, I read the Brothers Karamazov, and then I moved to Russia, and I had this experience. Like, if the whole subgenre of essays on didacticism were essays on, at times I had a moral epiphany while experiencing a work of art, I would be much more interested in that subgenre. But they tend to come at it from the perspective of, here I too am on this, I'm sitting over the author's shoulder, seeing what lesson he is delivering down to hoi below, right down to those hogs, and I agree with that lesson. And that, so because those essays, I think, tend to be written from that perspective, I take up the question from that perspective. But when it comes to like individual people reading books or seeing movies or seeing paintings or listening to works of music and having various complicated moral and emotional experiences, who am I to second guess their moral and emotional experiences in response to works of art?
But I mean, isn't the largest example of what you're talking about in terms of people being affected or changed by literature biblical? Coming to faith? Like,
Uh,
isn't that Augustine? I understand that Augustine didn't come through the Bible,
well, no,
but
but I was going to say that's,
those
what,
are life,
there's a
right?
version of a,
Those
like, I
conversion,
would be way more interested in conversion narratives if more of them were like, man, I read this book and it changed. Like,
yeah,
again,
yeah.
like, I don't. It doesn't.
I actually
The
don't know.
problem is that those things
Would
don't.
you be more interested in that?
Well, I think the problem is like what those essays
Or
would.
do those just not exist? Like, is your bigger point not that what you would want is to see more people who have read books? Because, like, I'm sure people read Eat, Pray, Love, or read The Alchemist, and then like went on some vacation or like divorced their husband. Is that what you are more interested in?
Well, I think there are actual, like,
Because I think you would be eye rolly and incredulous. I think you would.
no, but I think like very seldom do people have, like, respond to a work of art and then go on to have a major experience in response to that. Like, I mean, like, imagine what an interesting, like, if you took somebody who just at face value read Eat, Pray, Love, and I haven't read it, so I shouldn't speak, but like read that book and said, okay, wow, that makes me want to go to another country and have a whole experience. That, what would that experience actually result in? Probably
Yes,
not landing at the same place as Elizabeth Gilbert. What my point is that I would be much more interested in that whole genre of essay than I am interested in the genre of essay that says, sitting up here with the author, here's how books should
I
teach
agree with
lessons.
that, but I think to the core of both of those points is that you and I just don't believe, or maybe you believe more than I do, but in the power of art.
No,
Like,
I don't think.
our first response would be somebody read your book of poems and then changed their life, or somebody read my novel, or somebody read Eat, Pray, Love, or The Alchemist. I think our first response would be, it wasn't about the work of art. Like, if you got divorced after reading this book, it's probably because you were going to get divorced and you happen to have read this book. Like, I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah,
I wouldn't believe it.
yeah. No, I think so. No, I mean, I think usually when people have that kind of response to a book, the book is serving the function of like McKinsey Consulting, which is we hired them because we wanted to fire this person, and
Right,
they told us
right,
why we could fire this person.
right. We read this book because
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to be
So
moved to
right, yeah,
change our
no,
life.
I don't believe in the power of art to you know to morally change people. I think a whole lot more than you do. I just think that it would be much more interesting to see like how if people actually have strong responses to works of art and change their lives. My question is not just like what lesson do you think you initially learned from it, but like what consequences resulted from you responding to it in this way. Because again, I think that essay would actually be about that person's life, not
Yeah,
about what lesson the
right.
book
It
teaches.
would be a novel or
Yeah,
something
yeah, yeah,
instead of
exactly.
right a literary
Right. Like
memoir.
it would be an Italica, you know, novel. Yeah.
So before we get to why I found Daniel Cowper so unlikable, I do feel the last place I want to push us, because we haven't done a
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
great
yeah.
job of this, is have we just given ourselves permission with an overexpansive definition of pleasure to evade the actual difficult conversation? Like, because I would say, like, my only goal in writing this novel is to bring pleasure. And then you would push me on it, and I would say, pleasure pretty much encompasses everything. Like,
Right.
it would
Yeah, yeah,
become a
yeah, yeah.
tautology. It would be like, pleasure is just all the reasons one enjoys reading a novel.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
so,
I think yeah, partly yes, partly I think anytime you or I sit back and say, here is an abstract statement about what my art is, that's going to be very rounded off, very contingent, and as with you know Lewis's argument about iconoclast, like reality being iconoclastic, it's just it's not actually going to have it's only going to correspond so much to what we're actually doing when we sit down and write. That I think like a truer version of that statement would be I have read books and had lots of strong, complicated experiences reading them and have coveted the power to do that to others. And now get excited thinking about the experience that others might have in like how something I could make for them.
but all of the experiences you would classify within that category of pleasure or enjoyment,
Well,
as
I
opposed
think
to learning or, whatever.
when I sit back and start to come up with abstract categories, then yes. But when I'm actually in the midst of writing, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I try,
So, so
and I don't want to, as much as possible, I don't want to try to make myself write according to abstract categories.
So that goes back to my initial phony but probably honest claim in the beginning of this conversation, which is just that, like, trying to write a thesis driven essay sucks. Like,
Yeah,
anytime
yeah,
you
yeah.
sit
Like,
back
and you're
and
saying
try
that about
to
an essay, not even a novel or a poem. Like you're saying,
right,
not it's not
right,
just that a thesis driven novel sucks. A thesis driven essay sucks.
right. I'm saying that opinion pieces are
Yeah.
oh, aren't I don't know, don't have value. I I've probably read more opinion pieces than I have any other type of written work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, because every day I read them, every single day. I I mean, I probably also read parts of a novel every day, but I probably spend more time reading opinion pieces than I do anything else. And I don't know if they're delighting or instructing. I just it
Yeah.
seems like they're it seems if not entirely closer to sophistry than anything else, and often sophistry within limits. There's like
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
center
yeah.
left sophist, or the anti-war sophist, or
Right.
the Trump apologist sophist. And I can't. I mean, I was going to say out of every 99, every 199 are garbage, but like, is it maybe 100 out of 100? I just don't. When I was trying to write them, I just kept on getting back to the point where I was thinking, like, I'm just making things up. I'm just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
like it might as well be AI. Like AI,
Right.
I am just painting by numbers.
You're doing the same function AI is doing, which is
Right.
like, yeah,
I
what's
like,
a plausible human argument?
right. I've taken 100,000 human arguments and I'm trying
Yeah.
to make a human argument. I don't.
Yeah. I don't know if I have a coherent I don't know if I can if I can construct a thesis statement
Right,
essay in response to that. But my instinct is yes. My instinct is I share that impulse.
So many of the essays that you and I have discussed, almost all of them, even the ones we've said this is pretty good, we've said this is pretty good, but it would be better if it were fiction. Like it. It is so rare to the point of maybe non-existent where I've read an essay and I don't know, some of them have made me like laugh, like some of them have been entertaining.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. I don't know.
There's a version that I find maybe more pleasing and valuable, which is it is the way I've started to feel about my own essays lately, which is like I think of it as like being it's not Montaigne, it's more like Sontag or Borges will do this thing sometimes where they'll sort of say like, what if this were a thesis? And they kind of take it so lightly, but with such a sort of a crisp and like sharp eye that they then sort of play out like, okay, so let's say this is the case. And then it can be an interesting, and then they just let it go.
Right, but so much of the pleasure of the Borges is a novelistic pleasure, not an essayistic pleasure.
Well, but I think there's a sincere intellectual pleasure to like thinking through how an idea could work while taking it lightly enough to be able to let it go immediately afterwards.
But I am speaking about essays, the goal of which is to convince.
Yeah, and that I think you're right. I think I don't know how good an argument I could make, but I know that my feeling is with you on this.
An opinion piece, like opinion pieces.
My feeling is that almost always is going to produce or in experience almost always does produce sort of a degraded intellectual experience,
which
like setting out to prove a thesis in this way.
And I think one of the reasons I so disliked listening to the 3 hours of Daniel Cowper is he seems to be an opinion piece in human form.
So that's the first half of the conversation between Brian and Matthew about didacticism. The second half is significantly looser and even more fun to listen to. It is, as has been foreshadowed, a conversation about the interview with Daniel Cowper. And without giving too much away, I would just like to say that I do agree with everything that Brian said. I just am unfortunately nowhere near as articulate as he is, but I was wanting to stand up and applaud while I was editing the Secret Show half of this episode. You can listen to that if you haven't signed up already by going to SLEERICKETS.substack.com. Put in your email address. You'll get a week's access to all the episodes that are on there for free. And after that week is over, you do not have to pay very much. It's well worth it. You get all the extra episodes. You get access to the Substack chat. You can even send in your own work for a critique if you're a Secret Show subscriber. So don't miss out on that. I am going to weigh in myself on the Daniel Cowper conversation at the end of the Secret Show episode. And I did just want to add here, I felt a strong sense of relief when Brian was describing me in this conversation as maybe one of the more left-wing hosts of SLEERICKETS. I have been quite worried recently that there's a possibility that my political leanings have been missed or misinterpreted. But I do just want to make clear, in case there was any doubt at all, that I am about as far left as you can get without falling off the edge. I say this because, I had been worried, and I was telling myself, oh, you're worrying needlessly. You don't need to be concerned. No one's got the wrong end of the stick. But then I got probably my second ever solicitation for poetry. And it's always nice to be asked to send your poems to an editor. But unfortunately in this case, the journal that I was being asked to submit to is, I guess I would just have to say in the politest possible terms, is a right-wing journal. So I feel like I just need to take a little second here to say to any editors of right-leaning journals who see that I'm writing in meter and rhyme and think, okay, cool, let's ask her for something. I just really want you to know that I'm your worst nightmare. I'm absolutely your worst nightmare. I'm not who you want. I'm not the one. And I was talking to Tom about this, and I said, what should I do? How do I respond? And he said, look, you don't need to respond at all. And so in the end, I decided to just archive the email. But I think next time, what I might do is just send them my best impression of an Adrienne Rich poem. Like a loose, free verse, conversational poem about my time helping out at the abortion clinic. I think that's probably what I should do. I think that would be the best course of action. Thank you all for listening. You can reach Matthew, as always, at SLEERICKETS@gmail.com. And with any luck, we will all be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.